I'm Jan of Jan's Jewelry Supplies. Welcome to Soldering Made Easy Video 3. With this video we will be learning to make a full round pendant or two-sided pendant. This is a sample of the pendant we'll be making, but the one that we will be making is going to be a larger version of this pendant. For this project you will need 66 8mm 39SS Rivolis and 66 settings, as well as two 8mm 16-gauge jump rings. I've used 12 Hyacinth, 10 Topaz, and 11 Peridot on each side. That gives us 33 on each side. To make this project, I'll be using two different solder wires. One of them will melt at 300 degrees and the other one will melt at 450 degrees. I've already soldered one side of the piece. With this, I used the 450 degree solder, and for the other side, I will be using the same solder. When I come in and add the jump rings and join them together, I will be using the 300 degree. I'm going to go ahead and set this up. To make your curved piece, you will need to use either a J board or some wet floral foam. You see mine is already a little toasty. You're going to need to make an indention. I'm using a dapping tool for that. You can use a golf ball, or if you want to make a larger piece, you can use a pool cue. Or anything round will work. I'm going to go ahead and roll out some Play-Doh. Get that nice and flat to line my foam board. Now that I have my Play-Doh flat, I'm going to go ahead and line my foam board. This is a floral foam and it needs to be the wet floral foam. Can't use the dry, it will flame. So tap that a little bit to get it nice and snug down there. I set this aside and I'm going to start laying out my rhinestones. I'm going to start out with the centerpiece being Hyacinth, and then I'm just going to lay them out and rotate them. Hyacinth, or Topaz, Peridot, Hyacinth, and I'm just going to go ahead and start doing my rows. My first one is going to have 1, my second one is going to have 6, my third one is going to have 11, and my fourth one is going to have 15. I have my rhinestones laid out according to their placement. The first one here will be my first row, and this second one, this will be my second row. This will be my third row, and this will be my fourth row. As you can see, the colors are alternating. I've alternated them this way and this way. I'm going to start laying them out into the dough, my foam board. The first row is just 1. You can see this. I have also marked this as my starting point so I'll know where to start on each row. I pick up my first one from my second row and I place it along with this line. I'm going to continue around. The reason why I didn't lay them out in the circular pattern like the pendant is because when they're laying on a flat surface, the placement is going to be different than on a rounded surface. It takes more stones and settings for a flat surface than it does for the curved surface. So if you try and lay it out, your placement is not going to be right. Okay, I'm going to pick up the first one again. I'm following my line here. Make that even with this one. That is the first one for my second row. I have the stones and settings laid out on my third row now. As you can see, they're relatively spaced evenly. You want relatively even edge around here. I'm going to go ahead and start adding the stones and settings on my third row. I'm going to start at my starting point that I've made right here. I'm going to set this stone right here. And I'm going to start working my way around. You want to make sure that your stones are sitting flat. If they're curved, you're going to see it from the front side, so you want to make them as flat as possible. I now have all the stones set for all 4 rows of my piece. I now want to see whether or not the other half is going to fit on it nicely. If it doesn't fit well, then you may want to do a little bit of adjusting. It seems like that's going to fit on there pretty well. It should be pretty even. Now I'm going to go ahead and start soldering this. On this piece, we have to use the higher melting point solder, the 450-degree solder, for this portion of it. Because this solder melts at 450 degrees instead of 300 degrees, you're going to have to get the metal hotter than you would with a 300 degree, obviously. But once it heats up, it goes pretty fast. Just heat your metal and then dot it. Don't have to use a whole lot of solder. Apply the heat, move it out of the way, touch it with the solder, apply the heat, move it away, touch the metal with the solder, and just continue until you hit every possible joint that you can. I've used the solder to join every possible gap that I possibly could. If you see the silver, this is where the solder is on each and every one of these. Don't have to get every single one, but you want to get pretty close. It's going to have to connect at enough places that it holds together. And I hit just about every one. You want to make sure that there is enough there to keep it together. Once it's cool, you can take it out. I generally, on these pieces, I do not clean them until after I've done the next step. Actually, I generally don't clean them until I'm finished, because if I wet this, it is going to hinder the solder on the next process. But I do want to get as much clay up off of it as possible. I now have two sides that I have soldered with the 450-degree solder. I am going to join these two sides together using a lower temperature solder and the heat gun. Just going to place them together as best I can, and I am going to set them down inside the floral foam that is lined with the Play-Doh. And to keep them together, I'm just going to brace them with some more Play-Doh. And it does take a while for the heat gun to start warming the piece, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. And this is just a craft heat gun embossing tool. I have this side soldered together. Before I flip it over, I'm going to add a jump ring. I am going to use the third hand to do that. I want to try and get it pretty much center. Set it in place. Oops. And again, I'm going to use the heat gun. I'll let that cool, then I'll turn it over and I'll do the other side. I pulled my piece out of the clay and I'm getting ready to solder the other side. To do so, I want to make sure that I don't have any extra clay on the edge that I'm trying to solder. It may get in the way of my solder if I do. This right here is fine. On this edge, I can clean this up later. But this edge right here where I'm going to be soldering, I'll need to make sure there's no clay there. Seeing as how my jump ring, once I set this down in the clay, is not going to be visible, I need to mark a spot directly opposite of the first jump ring. I'm going to set that down for a minute. Here's my jump ring. I want it centered And I'm just going to eyeball it. See that? Right there is my mark with my Sharpie. That's where I will want my jump ring. I'm going to set this in the clay with the other jump ring side down, and I'm going to solder here, here, and I'm going to attach my jump ring here. I'm going to go ahead and set this in the clay. I'm going to do it the same way as I did the other side, putting a brace on each side. Actually, I don't particularly need the brace, but seeing how it's already soldered on the one side, but I always feel more comfortable with it braced. Okay, I am going to take the heat gun and I am going to heat up the metal. Solder a few more spots. And it does take time to heat up. To add a little dot of solder right here where I'm going to put the jump ring. Just to make sure I have a good connection there as well. I'm going to put this down and go ahead and place my jump ring where I want it using the third hand. And I'm watching for my spot with the magic marker. I'm going to apply some more heat. Now I'm going to remove this from the clay and clean it off. I've cleaned all the clay off this piece and I'm ready to attach the tassel. I'm using a pre-made tassel. You can make your own, but this one is pre-made. So all I have to do is open up the eye pin and attach it to this jump ring. And then close the eye pin. And we're done. Thank you for watching Jan's Jewelry Supplies Soldering Made Easy Video 3. Look for our other videos for other soldering techniques. Thank you.